The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And if you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. And we're coming to you tonight on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, and on Channel 54, that is the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. For more information about Simul TV and how you can get a subscription to Simul TV, please visit their website at www.simultv.com. Before I get to my final guest for this evening, Michael Cremo, we, as many of you know, at around 11 o'clock Eastern, that is 8 o'clock Pacific, there were strange things happening with the internet as well as our satellite transmissions, and we found out that this has been happening to a number of broadcasters. For example, Facebook is down, and they have been down more and more areas across the United States and Canada with Facebook and other online services, including PayPal, are starting to go down. Nobody knows at this time what the problem is. Our people, as well as the other broadcast engineers and technicians around the world, are trying to figure it out. But the thing is, we're back. They were able to get us back on our satellites as well as online. So I apologize for the last 2 hours being off air, but these things do happen, and we just have no control at times. But the thing is, we're back, and joining me now is a gentleman we've had the pleasure of having on the show before, Michael Cremo. And Michael, welcome to the X Zone.
Hey, Rob. Good to be with you and all your viewers and listeners.
Good seeing you, Michael. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. It's always a great pleasure talking to you. For those new listeners that we have and viewers around the world, Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm probably best known for my book, Forbidden Archeology, which is about archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity, evidence showing that humans like us have existed on this planet for far longer than modern scientific theories allow. Mm-hmm. And of course, that means we need new explanations for human origins. And I think those new explanations are going to have to involve taking consciousness seriously, because I don't think we are, as many modern scientists tell us, just machines made of molecules. Mm-hmm. I think there's a conscious self there. There's a subtle mind element with some very unusual abilities and powers. I think all these things have to be taken into account when we talk about human nature, human origins, human antiquity.
Based on your experience and the work that you've done over the years, Michael, where do you believe, based on the research you've done again, where is the origin of humans? Where did we come from?
Well, that's a very good question. I tried to give an answer to that question in my book, Human Devolution, mm-hmm. The Vedic Alternative to Darwin's Theory. And basically what I proposed is, before we even ask the question, where did we come from, we should first of all understand what we are, because that's going to determine what you have to explain. So as I was just mentioning, I think there's more to a human mm-hmm. being than ordinary matter. There's a subtle mind element, there's a conscious self, and I think how all those things came together is the real puzzle that we've got to answer. And I think there's an extraterrestrial element to it, as conscious individual personal beings I don't think we are from this level of reality. So, in that sense, we're all extraterrestrials. None of us, as conscious, individual, personal beings who can exist apart from the brain, apart from the body, none of us are from here ultimately.
Well, how old is our species then, Michael?
Well, I would say it goes back to the very beginnings of the life in the universe, because the way I look at it, we're in a consciousness based universe, something like a virtual reality system. And we're from, as conscious beings, we're from outside that system. And what are we here for? We're here to educate ourselves to the level where we can understand that we're not part of the matrix, as it was put in a series of films a little while back. We're from outside the system, and that's very important to realize. That can be realized in the human form of life. So I think this universe that we exist in has a purpose, and that purpose is for that educational purpose. And for that, the human form of life has been necessary, I think, right from the beginning. Just like when we send scientists send up a space station, they don't just hope that the chemicals in the space station are going to combine and form some first living thing that will evolve into an astronaut. Yeah, they build the space station for astronauts that already exist, and they're going to be sent up there. So I think our universe is something like that. It has a purpose. That purpose can be fulfilled in the human bodily vehicle, and therefore that vehicle has been available since the very beginning of the history of life here.
Now, what kind of evidence is there, Michael, for extreme human antiquity?
Well, that gets you into the history of archaeology. You know, if you look in the current textbooks of archaeology, you're not going to really find any such evidence. But what we have to understand is that what we see in the textbooks today is only a fraction of all the discoveries that have been made for the past couple of centuries.
Right.
And when you start looking into those reports, those earlier reports, which continue right up to the present day, really, you find many instances in which scientists, such as archaeologists, geologists, and paleontologists, have found human bones, human artifacts, and human footprints going back, in many cases, millions or even tens of millions or hundreds of millions of years. And it certainly contradicts what we're being told today.
So why isn't the truth being told? Why aren't we changing the text? Why aren't we saying, you know what, we're learning something new. This is what we have learned, and we have to go forward with a different way of thinking.
Well, if these discoveries were properly understood, that's what should be happening.
Right.
But what happens is sometimes in the world of science, people become committed to a certain paradigm. And that paradigm, that set of ideas and convictions and methods and conclusions, allows scientists to say, okay, if something doesn't fit the paradigm, there's probably something wrong with it. I don't know exactly what, but we're just going to set that aside, put it in a little parking lot somewhere, and maybe we'll get back to it someday. So there's a process of knowledge filtration that operates in the world of science. And these things that don't fit are called anomalies. But if enough of them stack up, eventually they're not going to be able to ignore it. So we'll see when that tipping point comes.
Michael, stand by. I've got to take a small break, and we'll be right back. X-Zone Nation, our guest this hour is Michael Cremo. And if you'd like to find out more about Michael, visit his website, mcremo.com. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. Our good guest tonight, once again, in this final hour of tonight's show, is Michael Cremo. We'll both be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Michael Cremo is my guest. And Michael, what was it that drew you to the work that you're doing with, the real human origins and forbidden archaeology?
Well, I would have to say it was my encounter with the spiritual tradition of ancient India. When I was younger, I encountered the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, and I was really amazed that they contained accounts of human populations existing on this planet going back many millions of years. And it was something completely different than anything I'd ever learned from my teachers in high school or university. And I began to think, well, is there perhaps some truth to this, or is it just some kind of mythology that was made up by these sages and poets a few thousand years ago? So that's what got me looking into the history of archaeology. And I thought, maybe I'll do, 8 days of research.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll find a few little things and I'll write a little article about it and go on to something else. But when I started digging into this, I found one discovery just led to another. It was like finding this huge catch of buried evidence that had been filtered out. And the 8 days turned into 8 weeks, into 8 months, into 8 years, because one case just led to another. So I collected all of these cases of archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity in this book, Forbidden Archeology, which is 900 pages. So it's not just a few discoveries, it's a great many discoveries. And then that led to so many other things.
Let me ask you this question. If the current theories of human origins are wrong, okay, then what do you think the replacement theory should be?
Well, I think it's going to involve an extraterrestrial element. I think it's going to involve accepting consciousness as something that can exist independently from the brain, from the body. And I think it's going to involve some kind of cosmic intelligence. And it may involve the idea that we're in a simulated world right now. And
so,
that
like,
our real existence is outside the simulation.
So something like in the Matrix, or like in Star Trek, the holodeck.
Yeah, something like that. And a little earlier this year, I went to a conference called The Science of Consciousness. It's held every couple of years in a different place around the world. This time it was in near Tucson, Arizona, and it attracts leading scientists and scholars who are involved in cognitive studies, neurophysiology, and everything to do with consciousness. And one of the main scientists there, well, actually he's a philosopher of science, David Chalmers, was there, and he was presenting this idea that, how do we know that we're not in a simulated world right at this moment? He said, really, there's no way you could tell that you're not. And I think that's a really valuable way of of looking at things. Because what generally happens in a virtual reality system or a simulated world is you've got somebody outside the system that is connected to it by, either, an Oculus
Yes.
VR thing or some other interface with the system. And then you have an avatar within the system that functions within the physical laws that are programmed into that simulated world. It's maybe interactive as well with several participants. But if you look into the avatar, you're not going to find any source of consciousness. That's coming from outside. So I would say the odds are that we're now in a simulated reality, and what we think is our identity is not it. And we're going to have to find out how we were placed into this system, and that's the real story of our origins. And I think as I said, it may involve an extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional element. It may involve higher intelligent beings, because obviously it takes some intelligence to arrange a system like this. And I think it also has to accept the reality that consciousness is not a product of material combination in this universe. So it's a different way of thinking. But I think that the development of virtual reality systems makes it easier for people with some scientific or philosophical leanings to take this idea, say, more seriously than they would if they just encountered these kinds of ideas in the philosophy of Descartes or in a strictly theological context.
But what happens if the reality that you and I are in right now is real, and that there is nothing more to the existence than what we're experiencing now? We're born, we live, and we die. Boom, that's it.
Well, I would say I wouldn't say that this reality that we're experiencing now is not real. It's real, but it's temporary. And I think we all have a sense of that, which is why we sometimes feel uncomfortable when, we look around us and we see that, yes, this body that I have, it came into existence at a certain point in time, at a certain point of time. I mean, everybody is talking about Queen Elizabeth.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, her bodily vehicle stopped functioning. So you could say, well, that's it.
Right.
That's all there is. And that sort of thing, I mean, why is everybody so worked up about it? Because I think it reminds them of the transitory nature of our existence here. And somehow we're uncomfortable with that. Most people, anyways, feel a little bit discomfort. And I think the reason for that is that the conscious self by nature is eternal and it knows it. So if we temporarily identify ourselves with the vehicle that our conscious self is presently inhabiting, then of course we're going to be uncomfortable.
Michael, is it possible that there are those inside the scientific community and outside of it who just cannot fathom the idea that this is all there is to it, that what they are trying to do is come up with a hypothesis to give the possibility that this just isn't it.
I don't think there are very many scientists trying to do that. There are some.
Mm-hmm.
There are some philosophers and scientists who take a position kind of like the one I just outlined.
Right.
David Chalmers, for example, he's published a book called Reality Plus, in which he said, I've always been an atheist, but this idea of simulated worlds, as I've encountered it in, the developing digital technologies,
Mm-hmm.
has made me consider the possibility that there may be a creator, who designed the simulated reality that we're in now. And, so there are some philosophers and scientists who,
Mm-hmm.
confronted with their inability to explain the origin of consciousness, are exploring new ideas, like the idea that matter itself may be conscious. This is panpsychism, and it's behind the idea that, well, we've been seeded into this level of reality. There's some conscious seed that, so you do get scientists, when confronted with their inability to solve the question of where consciousness came from, are beginning to explore alternatives.
How will this affect the future? How will this be a betterment for mankind?
Well, I think a lot of our problems that we're facing in the world today are traceable, at least in part, to the idea that we're purely material beings. We're machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. And our sense of identity is very important. Say if I identify as an American man, that's my main sense of identity. Not that I'm a conscious self that happens to be born in this life in America, but that's my total identity. If we identify in a very material way, then we tend to act on that basis. Our goals and values are shaped by that sense of identity. So if we have a very materialistic concept of what we are, then our goals and values tend to become influenced by that. And I think that's the root of our environmental crisis, our desire to produce, consume more and more material things in competition with each other, sometimes violent competition, as we see in wars and civil disturbances and things like that. So if we divide ourselves up into competing groups on the basis of superficial identification with some external features of our identity, then we're going to get a certain type of world, pretty much the world that we see around us, with environmental disasters, conflict on all levels of human society, unsustainable consumption of resources, class conflict.
But isn't that what being a human has been like since the beginning of history as we know it?
Yes, and that's why ultimately we're meant for another platform of existence, I believe, where the ruling principle is harmonious, loving cooperation. For conscious selves who have chosen, for whatever reason, to become selfish, exploitative, domineering, that's what this reality we now inhabit is for. But it's to provide a field of activity for that type of consciousness. But it's also an opportunity to understand I'm being a pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness, we're all beings of pure consciousness. No need to divide ourselves up into so many competing groups. And let's try to satisfy our material necessities in the most simple, natural, and efficient and fair, just way possible, while putting most of our human energy into developing that resource of consciousness. Then we're on another path. We've got another type of civilization. So
yeah, I can understand that, and to a certain point, I can appreciate it. But it seems like the people who are looking at the consciousness and the progression, using the AI model, are taking the humans out of humanity.
Well, if we're talking about, the transhuman types that want to replace everything with machinery, then yeah, I would agree with you. And no doubt what I'm saying is a minority position in the world today. I mean, it would be nice to live in a time and place when one's personal convictions are reflected in the elites of the society or civilization in which one finds oneself. But I guess we don't always have that luxury. So I'm aware that my ideas are not shared by the elites, scientific, educational, cultural elites of the whole worldwide civilization that we're embedded in these days. But nevertheless, I feel there's some value in these ideas, and I'm ready to communicate them with whoever thinks there also might be some value to it. But I've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Not just me, but anyone, because I don't think I'm the only person who has ideas like this. I don't have a monopoly on them. But I know I'm part of a minority opinion.
All right, Michael, stand by. I've got to take my break. So, Exonation, Michael Cremo is our guest, and his website is mcremo.com. That's MCREMO.com. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. I'll be back after this break. Michael Cremo is my guest, Exonation. His website is mcremo.com. Michael, how do you see the world of tomorrow based on the consciousness model that we were talking about in the first two segments?
There are some hopeful signs, but the kind of world that we live in depends upon the decisions that each of the 9 billion or so billion people on this planet make. If we have more and more of them understanding this phenomenon of consciousness, that it can't be reduced to chemistry or matter. It's not that consciousness is produced by matter. It's the other way around, actually. I would say matter is ultimately coming from consciousness. This is a position, sometimes it's called idealism in terms of philosophy. It's a kind of different sort of idea than is dominant in the world today. So the more people that begin to understand the primacy of consciousness and begin to act on that basis rather than on the basis that they're purely material beings, machines made of matter, we'll get a different kind of civilization, a different kind of world. So many people are beginning to live in alternative communities, either in individual contexts, people just getting out, living a more simple, natural life, and others doing it on a communal basis. So I think I can see more and more things going in that direction. Eco villages. This summer I visited an eco village in Europe, in Central Europe. It's a very nice place. And in November, I'm going to visit an eco village in India where sustainable living is being practiced and taught. So it's all consciousness based, however. So I see hopeful signs.
How would you describe, or can you give us examples about sustainable living in India?
Well, this place I'm going to is in eastern India. It's called the Govardhan Eco Village. And I'm interested to see what they're doing there. At this place I was in Hungary this summer, it's a community of several hundred people, men, women, and children, living off the grid. And, they rely on only solar power, wind power. Of course, it was summertime, but they had, in the winter, they have a forest land that they sustainably harvest for wood, and they do their heating with wood. And you may think, well,
but if they take,
go ahead.
If they take all the wood out of the forests, aren't they defeating their own cause?
Well, like I said, they do it sustainably, which means it's calculated how much you can actually take out.
Okay, that's a small village, but what happens when the population grows to such a size or such a number that the sustainability of the forest is no longer feasible?
Well, ultimately, if we look far into the future, I think we're going to have to ultimately reverse our urbanization process. That's because I don't think these huge mega cities of 20 million people are sustainable ultimately. And it may be as environmental pressures increase, we'll begin to see that because just for basic survival, like I live in Los Angeles at the present moment, for food, we're dependent upon a transportation system that reaches worldwide. If that transportation system breaks down, we're in big trouble. And there are many. So ultimately, I don't think this mega city complex idea is going to be sustainable far into the future, and we may have to go back to a different type of organization.
So it seems like we're going backwards instead of forward.
Depends what you mean by going forwards. If going towards unsustainable consumption of resources, conflict over water, environmental destruction as it's being presented to us, rising sea levels, desertification, more forest fires and things like that. It's this isn't to deny that there are advantages to some facets of our modern industrial urban lifestyle, but whether it's ultimately sustainable for the long run, we're just going to have to see. I don't think it is.
So if this is the case, Michael, and this is the type of world that you and other philosophers envision, why do we need to, what's going to happen to space travel, for example? Are we still going to have to find other planets to populate? Is birth control going to be part of this process? And are we looking at trying to recreate a utopian society where everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya?
Yes and no, but it's taken us a long time to get into the situation we're in at the moment, so it's probably going to take a long time to work our way out of it if we do manage to do so. But it depends on voluntary simplicity. Because, ultimately, people are going to decide, how they want to live, and they're going to have to accept the results of it. So,
well, isn't that what we're doing now?
Yeah, that is a fact. But if there can be models that people can look at, like this community in Hungary, it's called Krishna Valley. People come there, they see the lifestyle. Government officials from the EU, they come and they look and they see what's going on. So if you can provide a model that's attractive to people, and I think this is going to involve not just these kinds of things that we're talking about. It's going to mean experiencing things in terms of a consciousness-based worldview rather than a matter-based worldview. And consciousness can provide satisfactions, through different systems of meditation and yoga and contemplation and other things. One can tap resources within, experience a happiness and pleasure within that enables one to do without many of the things that are so destructive of the environment today.
Michael, I've got to take a break. We'll be right back. And we're back. Michael Cremo is my guest. His website is mcremo.com. All right, let's go on with the idea that this new way of going forward with this consciousness is accepted by the majority. What happens to the established religious philosophies that we've all grown up with and nurtured over the many years? Will they still be needed?
It all depends. I think the essence of religion is to understand that, to put it in theological terms, we're souls, ultimately. I prefer the term conscious self, because if I use the word soul, some people say, okay, that's belief, it's religion.
Right.
Yeah, but if I say conscious self, who can deny that? Everyone's conscious and everyone's an individual.
You're right. And
we have different ideas. And that sense of I am is not explained by any science that exists today. I mean, they have some faith that they're going to find the exact combination of molecules in the neurons in the brain that produce consciousness. They have a faith that eventually that's going to be discovered. But it's gone on for decades and decades, and they're not any closer to a solution to that problem. But I would say it would be transformative. It's and another thing that I think can happen with religion is that it seems, I've studied a lot of different faith traditions, and there seems to be an exoteric and an esoteric aspect to it, where on the exoteric level, it can be divisive. Like Europe had a whole history of religious-based warfare between the Catholics and the Protestants. Still goes on today in some limited fashion in some countries. So on that level, if people concentrate on their differences, their external differences, then you get, I hope that aspect doesn't survive, but the more esoteric aspect of different faith traditions, where there's some understanding that we're all related on the platform of spirit, I would say consciousness.
Okay, consciousness works great for humans, but what about the animals? Where do they fit into the future?
That is a very good question. And I would say the animal bodies, or even plant bodies, why stick to animals? I mean, there's all kinds of living things on this planet, including plants. And I would say the earth itself is alive in a sense. That was the meaning of the word Gaia from the Greek, the earth goddess. So I would say that in the animal body, there's the same kind of conscious self that I have, or any human being has, but it's the vehicle limits it. Like if I ride a bicycle, I can go so fast. If I get in another type of vehicle, like a motorcycle or a car, you can go faster and further than you can on a pedal bike.
Yeah, I understand that, Michael, but my question is, we as humans can comprehend these changes, and we can look at the hypothesis and make up our own minds whether or not we want to participate. But when it comes to the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the reptilian kingdom, the whatever, they do not have the ability to make that choice because they will not understand what is going on. So how do we use this new model if all the participants on this planet do not understand it or do not have the ability to understand it?
Well, a lot of my thinking on this is inspired by the Vedic tradition. And what it says is that a wise person should see all living things equally. And what happens is, you're correct that in the animal vehicle, the conscious self is not able to make these kinds of decisions that we're talking about here. What happens to them is that they gradually evolve. The conscious self evolves through the different animal species until it gets to the human form. And in the human form of life, it has the ability to make these kinds of choices and hopefully get out of the whole cycle of taking a vehicle, having it break down, get another one.
Okay. So here we're saying that the animals will evolve to where humans are today. So where do humans of today evolve to tomorrow?
Well, ultimately, a conscious self in the human vehicle should use it to come to the level of pure consciousness. In other words, get out of the whole cycle of birth and death in this world. You know, taking one vehicle after another, whether it's another human body or an animal body or an extraterrestrial body, just get out of the whole system and be permanently situated in an eternal form of pure consciousness.
Michael, we have to say so long for tonight. I want to thank you very much for joining us. And X Zone Nation, if you'd like to get more information about Michael Cremo, visit his website, mcremo.com. Well, that's it for tonight, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And we come to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, right here on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, and on Channel 54 on Simul TV. To my wife, she is my senior executive producer. Thank you, sweetheart, for all your hard work. Craig in Master Control, thanks, my friend. And to each and every one of you, thank you for allowing us to be part of your day or night, no matter where you are in this great big world of ours. And always remember to keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light. Good night, everyone.